I knew something was off the moment Rick Salerno called my 24 years in infrastructure background noise. The guy had barely warmed his chair, maybe 3 weeks in, and already acted like he'd blessed every Ethernet cable in the building with his greatness. Truth is, the man couldn't tell a kernel panic from a pop-up ad in Comic Sans, but he loved tossing around his shiny buzzwords. Flatten the hierarchy. Disrupt the legacy. Inject vibrant energy into back-end engineering. Whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. Name's Margaret Halley, though everyone here just calls me Hallie. For over 20 years I was the reason this place didn't fall apart. Rick never once asked what I actually did. Just looked at me like I was some leftover from a software museum. But the moment that really nailed it for me? He rolled in this ridiculous thing he called a passion meter, and made us take daily surveys. Big neon text. Gauge your fire. So, I gave myself a 3.14 out of 10 and told him that's how many seconds it took for his energy to become a security risk. He didn't get it. Just mumbled something about my attitude and wandered off, probably to go puff lemon sorbet vape in the break room. Now hey, if you're still here, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Seriously, 97% of folks who enjoy these stories never do, and it really helps out the whole crew behind this channel. Keeps the lights on, keeps the stories coming. Alright, back to it. So here's the thing, Rick thought he was some kind of tech god just because he could customize Slack emojis. Meanwhile, I'd been around since dial-up tones were still a thing. I watched this company grow from 6 scrappy folks in a rented WeWork space to a $300 million firm with government contracts riding on our uptime. And I did it all without ever needing a ring light or a TikTok strategy slide. But what Rick didn't know was I had a little secret. Something I'd been quietly building on the side for years, something real. It was an adaptive load balancer engine that could handle unpredictable bandwidth with live redundancy. I called it Osprey. Wrote every damn line myself on my own machines, without a single speck of company code touching it. It lived in a private repo, locked behind two-factor, properly versioned and documented. What started as a personal challenge turned into something I was truly proud of. Rick had no clue. What he did think, though, was that I was part of the old guard. Easy to push out. So he started the whole alignment routine HR sessions, awkward check-ins where they asked how energized I felt about their shiny new direction. I told them I felt energized enough to survive the next reorg. They didn't laugh. Then came the housekeeping paperwork. Rick handed it out like candy on Halloween. Just standard stuff, he said. A little IP alignment, nothing scary. I took mine home and read every word. Page 12, paragraph 17, anything I built during my time there, no matter when or where or how, belonged to the company. It was a corporate land grab. They were coming for Osprey. I didn't sign. I printed out that clause, highlighted it, slapped a sticky note on it that said, "My original terms stand," and sent it straight to HR. Kept a copy for my lawyer too. That should have ended it. But Rick couldn't help himself. At Friday's town hall, standing under a projector with that smug grin like he just invented fire, he showed off a new architecture initiative the team had been collaborating on. Called it Project Helix. And when he pulled up the interface, my stomach dropped like a rock. It was mine. Not a clone. Not a knockoff. Mine. The UI was simplified, sure, but I recognized it instantly. Even my debug flag, the one I hard-coded for testing, was still right there in the console. That arrogant jackass had scraped my repo. Probably during that one weekend I made it public by mistake to run an external test. I hadn't noticed then. I sure as hell do now. He stole it, rebranded it, and pitched it like it was his gift to the company. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to my desk, opened a secure channel, and called the one person I trusted with everything, my IP attorney. She answered on the first ring. I just said, "It's time." Because Rick didn't just try to cut me out. He walked right into a minefield. And he was too full of himself to hear it ticking. 2 weeks after Rick showed off his little innovation, the whole office went quiet, too quiet. And that's always how it starts. Calm on the surface. Right before the backstab lands. Then came the email, mandatory alignment agreements. HR dropped printed packets on desks like they were handing out coupons, complete with little smiley face posts that said, "Just a quick update." Rick strolled through the office like Santa hopped up on Adderall, chirping, "Just a little legal alignment. Nothing to stress about. Sign it and send it back." I didn't say a word. Just slipped mine into my tote, took it home, popped open a beer, and sat down at the kitchen table to read it. That same sinking feeling hit me. The kind I hadn't felt since reading my divorce papers. And there it was, buried in paragraph 17, bolded only in the metadata of the PDF. Any invention, design, or technology conceived or developed during employment, regardless of location or hours, shall be assigned to the company. They were trying to claim everything. Not just Osprey, every late-night note, every napkin sketch, every 2 a.m. spark of inspiration I'd had just to stay sane during Rick's reign of chaos. I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. I printed the packet, highlighted that clause like it was blood, and typed one plain sentence on a blank sheet of paper. My original terms stand. 12-point Times New Roman. I mailed it back to HR and signed. No explanation. If they had a shred of sense, they'd get the message. If they didn't, well, cluelessness was kind of their new brand anyway. Then Friday rolled around. Town hall time, Rick's weekly ego parade. He strutted up in a t-shirt that screamed, "Innovate or die," grinning like he just invented JavaScript. He launched into his show. "Our engineers have been hard at work behind the scenes," he said. "This dynamic load system represents the evolution of our legacy architecture." Big words. Flashy deck. Way too much eye contact with the execs. And then it hit the screen. My work. No tweaks. No rewrites. Just Osprey with a fresh coat of paint and a rebrand. Project Helix. I locked onto the console window. There it was, my debug flag still there in the corner. Tested Node 9. I'd left that in during latency simulations 6 weeks ago, running tests on a remote server. It never touched company systems. Never hit our shared infrastructure. The only way it ended up in that demo? Someone scraped the sandbox repo during the exact 72 hours I had it public testing on hotel Wi-Fi during a DevOps retreat. I didn't react. Didn't cause a scene. I just opened Notepad, typed a timestamp. Friday 1:13 p.m. That's when I started logging everything. Every lie Rick told. Every time he said we built, or our team created instead of giving credit where it was due. I documented every word, every claim. Clean. Precise. Like evidence. Because I knew what was coming. They were going to pitch this as part of our acquisition package. Rick would parade it around as his masterpiece. But once the investors started digging, once the due diligence kicked in, they'd want the source. And when they pulled those files, the first name they'd see. Mine. Because 4 years ago I set up a tiny LLC, Halicore. And last Tuesday, right after Rick's first big Helix demo, I filed a provisional patent through that LLC. Attached every line of code, every timestamp, every access log. Included a usage license with one critical clause. Clause 3.2. License revoked upon false attribution. I didn't need to start a fight. I just needed them to lie in writing. And Rick was already doing that for me live. By Tuesday, the office air smelled like dry-cleaned suits in desperation. Investor Day. For once, Rick showed up early. Slicked back hair, fluffy lanyard. Practically vibrating with fake confidence. He was bouncing like he was pitching to Shark Tank. Tossing out phrases like pipeline agility and vertical scaling like he hadn't Googled them 2 nights ago on a Reddit thread. He paraded the investors into the conference room like they were royalty. I followed, quiet, clipboard in hand, not because I needed to prove anything but because I knew exactly where this was going. Rick queued up the projector, beaming like a kid about to fake his way through a science fair volcano. Then he said the line that would come back to bury him. "What you're about to see is a breakthrough from our new in-house initiative." He said it 3 times. In-house. Like repetition could make it real. Then he hit play on the demo. And there it was again. My architecture. My adaptive load balancing logic. Same thread behavior, same threshold handling, same smoothing algorithm I wrote after a week of no sleep and 2 pots of diner coffee. But the part that really made my throat go tight? The performance metrics. I knew every single one. Each decimal, every tiny dip in the graph, it was mine. Identical to the numbers I generated during Osprey's early stress tests. Down to the last millisecond. He didn't even bother to cover his tracks. Just scraped the data, slapped it into the demo, and hoped nobody would catch on. I sat through the whole thing without moving. Didn't speak up. Didn't flinch. Just watched quietly as one of the investors asked, "And how recent is this work?" Rick smiled and said, "Last quarter. Born and built right here, under my team's agile framework." The sheer audacity of it could have boiled an entire lake. But I didn't let it get to me. I documented, logged the time, wrote down every false claim, watched our CTO nod in approval, while Rick butchered my threading algorithm with words he barely understood. And when the lights came on and the schmoozing began, I didn't stick around. Took the back stairs. No chit-chat, no eye contact. By the time I got home, I already had a fresh pot of coffee brewing. I pulled out the USB drive where I kept every single version of Osprey, triple-backed and checksum verified. I opened my call app, found the one name I trusted, and hit dial. "Hallie," my IP attorney said, voice groggy with sleep. "I need to move the provisional," I told her. "Now." There was a pause. Then she asked, "You got a name?" I didn't answer. Just sent her everything, the log file, the screenshot of my debug flag, and a video I'd quietly recorded during Rick's investor pitch. After I hung up, I sat in the garage, lights off, nursing my coffee, watching the blinking cursor on my terminal like it was a silent countdown. Rick didn't just steal my work. He walked into a locked room, signed the guest book, and bragged like he owned the place. But I was about to change the locks. Here's the thing, proving you built something isn't the hard part. The hard part is proving you always built it, before the vultures swooped in with buzzwords and sticky fingers. That's what I focused on for the next 6 days. Not emotions. Not anger. Just math, memory, and metadata. I started with the earliest commits. Ones I'd pushed from my garage laptop after a marathon weekend of coding 2 years back. Each one had a timestamp. Each timestamp had a hash signature. I cross-checked them with emails I'd sent to myself with naming styles only I ever used. Dug up old Slack messages with a mentee where I vented about the buggy early versions of my node rebalance logic. Even found a dusty Jira ticket I'd filed on my LLC's sandbox board, Osprey version 0.4, testing failover and unpredictable latency. That was long before Rick even knew we existed. I archived it all. Made 3 copies. Stashed one in a fireproof safe I hadn't opened since my divorce. Then I went digging through Git logs. Not just mine, his. The company kept track of every internal login. Rick's only access to the Helix repo came right after the sandbox weekend. His commits? Superficial stuff, renaming variables, cleaning up comments, changing spacing. Pure fluff. No core code. Nothing that pointed to real authorship. But Osprey? That had my DNA all over it. From the LLC domain I'd registered in 2018 to the original design notes, I scribbled out in Notepad++ and emailed to myself with the subject line, "Screw it. I'm building my own." I even found a Slack export from a freelance channel years ago where I asked a dev buddy, "How do I license something so my employer can't hijack it later?" She sent me the framework. I used it. That was 4 years ago. I'd forgotten just how thorough I was. Thank God I'm the kind of person who double versions her toaster firmware. Once I had every receipt lined up, I logged into the USPTO portal and filed the final safeguard. A formal provisional patent under HalleyCore LLC, complete with full documentation, visual diagrams, architectural flowcharts, and behavioral mapping. Everything from Osprey's threading logic to its bandwidth handling and queue smoothing. Officially registered. And I didn't stop there. I added a public commercial license. Clause 1.1. Attribution required at all times. Clause 3.2. License is void if false attribution is claimed by any party, internal or external. Clause 5.4. Any system built on this architecture must declare Osprey as its foundational framework. This wasn't just legal armor. It was a landmine wrapped in velvet. Because if they kept going, if they pushed this thing into the pitch deck, pasted it all over investor presentations, and tried to sell it as homegrown company innovation, that license clause would blow. And the fallout wouldn't touch me. Meanwhile, Rick was busy flooding Slack with cheesy motivational quotes. Success is 99% action. Ideas are worthless without execution. The man had no clue he was quoting his own eulogy. I didn't respond. I wasn't on defense anymore. I was writing the terms of their collapse. The second I heard the phrase strategic acquisition, my stomach didn't sink. It coiled, like a cat watching prey stroll right into striking distance. Word started trickling down from legal. A $200 million valuation. Tentative buyout in play. Buyer still unnamed. The whole office turned electric. People were buzzing like it was prom night. Suddenly, stock options were sacred. Colleagues who hadn't said a word to me in months started popping up, asking how I felt about our future. I smiled and said, I'm aligned. Rick, on the other hand, was practically levitating. He dropped the fake humility completely. Now it was all my vision, my system, legacy busting. He sounded like a walking TED Talk. Osprey didn't exist anymore. Not by name. It was Project Helix now, complete with a pseudo-Latin tagline, a polished logo, and some tech bro slogan about reshaping the spine of scalable infrastructure. I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd started handing out merch. Then came the vision alignment meeting. A 2-hour mess where Rick monologued while marketing folks nodded like disciples at the altar. Same demo. Same data. Same code. But this time he slipped. This time he said exactly what I'd been waiting to hear. Our team developed this architecture as an evolution of our legacy throughput logic. I typed it out, word for word, logged the timestamp, added a note in bold, public investor-facing statement. Because now it wasn't just theft. It was liability. He had made it part of the official investment narrative. And when the time came for the acquiring company to comb through technical assets during due diligence, Osprey would be front and center. So I went home, pulled up the National License Registry and made one tiny change. Clause 3.2. Already filed. Already valid. I added a timestamp. Revocation triggered on date of public false attribution. Inserted meeting time. And just like that, the license Rick and the execs were unknowingly hanging their $200 million valuation on turned to ash. Of course, they had no idea. They were still out there rehearsing slide decks and buying overpriced blazers. Let them. Let Rick strut around calling Helix the future. Let him drop it into every investor Q&A. Let him pitch it to the board like he soldered the code together with ambition and JavaScript. Every move he made was another step into a legal grave. I didn't warn him. Didn't warn anyone. I just showed up, took tidy notes, smiled at the right moments and said things like great progress. And happy to support however I can. Because there's something deeply satisfying about watching someone build a castle on sand you've already soaked. At that week's All Hands, the CEO praised Rick's initiative, called him a leader of vision, even hinted at bumping him up to VP. I clapped with the rest of them, didn't blink. Because while they were busy inflating numbers and chasing glory, I was finishing a kill switch. And they triggered it the second Rick claimed authorship. Not when he scraped the repo. Not when he changed the name. But when he stood in front of the world and said it was his. They thought my silence meant surrender. It didn't. It was just the sound of a fuse burning low. 2 days before Rick's big vision delivery. Pitched to the buyers, I was out in the garden, elbows deep in weeds, yanking invasive vines off the fence line when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Unfamiliar domain. But the subject line stopped me cold. IP confirmation request. Reference. Thales Systems/load engine schema. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the message. It was from a junior IP analyst at the acquiring firm. Poor kid was probably neck-deep in documentation cross-checking files, and had hit something that didn't line up. The message was polite, clinical, but I could smell the smoke underneath it. Can you confirm authorship of engine schema registered under Thales Systems LLC? Appears foundational to project Helix materials. Seeking clarification for legal review. This wasn't bait. It was a whistle. Someone had followed the breadcrumb trail I left behind: license filings, public repo timestamps, architecture logs filed under my LLC with the USPTO. Maybe they were just doing their due diligence. Maybe someone gave them a quiet heads up. Didn't really matter. They'd found the real name attached to the code. They had no choice but to ask. I didn't hesitate. I replied with a zip file labeled Osprey_ownership_package_3. Inside, a certified mail receipt. Proof I'd sent a hard copy of the license to my own LLC address a week earlier. Screenshots of commit logs and diff maps showing exactly how the code structure evolved over time. Metadata from the sandbox repo, including embedded access logs timestamped months before Rick even had his employee badge. And a PDF of the license agreement, with Clause 3.2 highlighted in bold yellow, and the triggered revocation clearly marked. At the bottom, I wrote one simple sentence. I retain all control unless explicitly transferred in writing. No follow-up. No signatures. No meetings offered. The package said everything it needed to. It didn't just confirm I wrote it. Confirmed I owned it. That kind of clarity doesn't invite negotiation. It stops deals in their tracks and sends legal teams scrambling. Less than 3 hours later, I got a read receipt from the analyst who'd contacted me. Then another. From someone in the acquiring firm's legal department whose title included the word partner. That told me all I needed to know. Meanwhile, Rick was still living in the fantasy. That afternoon, his LinkedIn post went live, stuffed with hashtags and empty self-praise. Proud to be bringing bleeding-edge architecture to scale. Hashtag innovation, hashtag leadership, hashtag scalability, hashtag helix. Not a word about me. Not a whisper of Osprey. Just a badly lit selfie in front of the conference screen. Arms folded like some low-budget Tony Stark, grinning on a foundation he didn't realize was already cracking beneath him. I didn't comment. Didn't like. Didn't share. I just closed my laptop, poured myself a drink and stepped out onto the porch. For the first time in weeks, I slept with the windows open. Because the storm wasn't on the way anymore. It was already inside the building. Wearing a suit and holding every single one of my receipts. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker wrapped in a pitch deck. 12 chairs. 2 law firms. Legal pads stacked like body armor. Coffee sitting cold, untouched. The air was too still, the kind of still that only shows up when something is about to bleed. Rick took his seat like he ran the place. Pinstripe suit. Shiny shoes. Hair shellacked into place like that would keep the truth from leaking out. Across from him sat the buyer's legal team, calm, sharp, not smiling. Their general counsel opened a slim leather folder and clicked a remote. The lights dimmed as the projector flickered on. Slide 1. Thales Systems IP license. Osprey load engine architecture. Bold. Centered. At the bottom in black and white. Registered under Halicore LLC. Clause 3.2 was highlighted in yellow, glowing like a warning sign. Rick gave a shaky little laugh. That kind of brittle sound you can only make when plastic panic starts crawling up your throat. Could someone explain what this is? Silence. The general counsel adjusted his glasses, voice steady. Before we proceed, we need clarification. Was this code, Project Helix, developed entirely by your internal engineering team, or sourced from an external provider? Rick blinked. Looked to the CEO. Then the CTO. Then back at the lawyer. It's ours, he said, voice pitching higher. It's from our infrastructure roadmap. Our DevOps. Who authored the core logic? The lawyer cut in sharp. Rick opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The CTO cleared his throat. Our records show contributions from several engineers, but not the question, the lawyer snapped. The schema. The architecture. The adaptive load engine logic. The threading core. Where did it originate? Rick flushed, first red, then pale, then somewhere in between like his system couldn't decide what emotion to land on. And then every pair of eyes turned toward me. I didn't move. Didn't shift in my chair. Didn't smirk or lean in or deliver some dramatic line. I just looked back at them. Calm. Clear. Watching the room fracture in silence. The CEO's mouth opened like he wanted to say my name, but wasn't sure if doing so would count as admitting guilt. The lawyer didn't wait. Because if this technology originated outside the company, he said, and was never properly disclosed or transferred, then this acquisition cannot proceed until the full intellectual property chain is clean. Clause 3.2 triggers an automatic revocation due to false attribution, unless explicit permission is on file. The lawyer clicked to slide 2. Status. License revoked, as of timestamp. Silence hit the room like a blackout. Rick started fumbling through his folder like a raccoon digging for a calculator. There must be a mistake, he muttered. I mean, it was on our servers. I thought we've been developing. No, I said. Just that. One word. Steady. Final. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't smirk. I simply tapped the binder in front of me and slid it across the table. Inside was everything. A printed copy of the license, the official patent filing, and the email thread confirming receipt by the acquiring firm's legal team. The lawyer flipped through it, paused, and gave a single nod. I believe that resolves authorship. Rick stared at the table like it had just turned on him. The CEO leaned back, steepling his fingers. Why didn't anyone catch this sooner? No one answered. They didn't have to. Because when you build your castle with borrowed bricks, you better pray the owner doesn't show up with the deed. And today I walked in with the deed. It didn't explode. It unraveled. Not with fireworks, not with shouting, just slow, methodical unthreading. Like someone quietly pulling apart the seams of a carefully stitched lie. The acquisition didn't collapse overnight. There was no dramatic halt. Just a quiet request from the buyer's lead counsel for a formal hold, pending clarification of IP provenance. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday, our compliance team, 3 tired analysts and 1 stressed-out legal rep, were buried in everything I'd handed over. Git logs, forensics, timestamps, patent certificates, Slack archives. They chased every trail, and all of them pointed to the same place. Me. By Thursday, the mask started slipping. The CTO canceled a scheduled town hall. The CEO was nowhere to be found. HR sent out a vague all-hands email titled, Status Update on Project Helix, which said a whole lot of nothing and ended with, individual conversations may follow. And on Friday, Rick was gone. No press release. No farewell cake. No slick new job post on LinkedIn. Just an HR rep with a blank face wheeling out a cardboard box while security lingered nearby. Word around the office was that he tried to argue, claimed the code was already baked in, the valuation lockdown, that his name was on the roadmap. Didn't matter. Clause 3.2 wasn't a footnote. It was a detonator. And they'd already pressed it. I didn't watch him go. Didn't need to. I was in the server room, swapping out a busted RAID controller, humming to myself like it was just another Friday. Later that afternoon, legal sent me a letter. Real paper, thick stock, company seal embossed at the top. Page 1. A formal apology from corporate counsel. Page 2. A consulting retainer under Hallicor LLC. 6 figures. Monthly. Auto-renewed every quarter. To support a system I had built on my own time. In my garage. With no funding, no oversight, and 0 recognition. Until now. I didn't celebrate. Didn't post a humble brag or drop a thread. I went home, threw on sweatpants, grilled a steak with way too much garlic butter, and slept like gravity finally let go of me. Monday morning, I walked back into the office. Not as an employee. As a contracted advisor. They handed me a new badge, temporary but with the same access level Rick used to have. I clipped it onto the same lanyard I'd worn for 24 years, right next to the coffee-stained old one. The door buzzed open just like it always had. My desk was still there exactly how I left it. But one thing had changed, the glass wall in the conference room. The etched vinyl that used to say Project Helix had been peeled off. Now it read, Osprey Architecture Advisory Support provided by Hallicor. I sat down, opened my terminal, took a sip of my coffee. Same mug, new title. And for the first time in months, the silence in the office didn't feel cold or suspicious. It felt earned. 6 weeks later, the acquisition finally closed. No confetti. No champagne. Just hushed handshakes and shorter meetings. The final valuation landed at $187 million, down from the original $200. The buyers had docked the difference for the IP breach and projected restructuring costs, now that their visionary had been escorted out like a broken printer. Nobody said the number out loud. They didn't have to. Everyone knew why it dropped. Everyone knew who caused it. And who kept it from falling apart completely. Fally Systems, my garage-born LLC, my late-night alter ego, my answer to years of being talked over in meetings, held full license authority over Osprey. Clause 6.7 was locked into the final paperwork. It gave me permanent IP veto power. If anyone wanted to pivot, resell, fork, or slap a new name on Osprey again, they'd need my written sign-off. No more theft hidden behind rebranding. No more credit vanishing into buzzwords. I didn't gloat, didn't give a speech. I quietly signed the new contract and handed it back to the buyer's legal team. They didn't blink. They were just glad the fire had been contained, though the scorch marks weren't going anywhere. At the closing dinner, they sat me next to the CTO and across from the lead investor. Everyone pretended like it was just another deal. Another line item on a Tuesday. The wine was overpriced. The steak bland. But during the toast, someone, I don't remember who, maybe one of the buyer's older architects, raised a glass, looked my way, and smirked. Next time, maybe just ask the person who actually wrote the damn thing. Few laughs. Even the CEO gave a quiet nod. I didn't smile. Just lifted my glass in return. Let the silence speak for me. Later that night, I pulled into my garage. The motion light blinked on. Same dusty shelves. Same rusting tool set. Same leaning stack of old company awards shoved into the corner: employee excellence, system stability, long-term service. All the polished little trophies they'd handed me instead of raises, promotions, or a seat at the table. I reached up and grabbed one, the heaviest. From 2012. Some nonsense title about infrastructure brilliance. I stared at the plaque. Felt like nothing. Didn't feel like mine. I wiped off the dust, walked over to the workbench, and placed it in a cardboard box labeled donation. Then I shut the light, locked the door, and went inside. They asked who owned it. I just showed them the receipt.